corrections. And the July 15th meeting minutes were reviewed and approved without any corrections, with Linda abstaining. That was done at the last meeting.
Okay. Okay, then, regarding the minutes of the planning board on August 19th, has everybody had an opportunity to review those? Are there any corrections, additions? Hearing none, I'll make a motion that the minutes be approved as submitted. Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, first on our agenda tonight is Lord Avenue property site plan. Minor subdivision.
Good evening, Walt Whitman, MJ Engineering, I represent the Lord Avenue Property LLC. Based on our conversation at the last planning board meeting, we're here tonight in hopes to, the board to go through parts 2 and 3 procedure, and to have a secret determination at the end of the meeting tonight. As you're going through, any questions that pop up, we're here to address anything.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we are in a position now to review parts 2 and 3. And I think Wayne will walk us through them.
Thank you.
Enough for everybody. Might be one on shoulder with that. Is there any copies left over?
There's 2 down here.
Okay.
One's
We'll put it back together and give it to the applicant. Okay, thank you. There's part 1, part 2, and part 3. And a memorandum. Remember grade school, taking them down? This one?
That should be good.
No,
Look great, Wayne.
he's missing part 2.
Chew, you get chew. Oh, I see, the memorandum was already down there. And three, two,
You're the partner.
there you go. And split them. There you go. There you go. Part 1, part 3. And another part 3.
I have it. I'm all set.
He's got a special copy. I'm going to turn the floor over to.
One extra long. Thank you.
And, walk us through the part 2 and part 3. Yep. I don't think there's anything to review in part 1, is it?
No, that's just for reference. What you have in front of you is the full environmental assessment form for Lord Avenue Property LLC. Part 1 was filled out by the applicant. That's just for reference. You also have the part 2 identification of potential project impacts. And part 3 evaluation of the magnitude and importance of project impacts. Determination of significance. Took the liberty of putting together a memorandum for the board. I basically was going to go through the contents of this memo. What it does, it states those items that we deem had some impact with some explanation. So I can go, let's see. Instead of going down through all the small items that have no impact, I'm just going to go off the memorandum, if that's okay. Andy, is that all right? You want to go
Yes.
through the whole part 2?
Well, we can just note for the record that the part 2 does show no potential significant adverse impacts on geological features, groundwater, air resources, aesthetic resources, historic or archaeological resources, open space or recreation, critical environmental areas, impact on human health, and that the project is consistent with community plans and consistent with community character. All that's based on review of the record and submittals by the applicant. With that, the balance of the items have been deemed to have an impact, and we will review those.
Okay, starting with item number 1 on page 1. The proposed action may involve construction on or physical alteration of land surface of the proposed site. Proposed action does involve construction on or physical alteration of the land surface of the site. To be cleared, the site will be raised by approximately 6 feet for construction of the supermarket building and parking area. Approximately 40,000 cubic yards of fill will be trucked into the site. Plan was submitted and reviewed for truck routing in connection with fill operations. Trucking for fill operations will be limited to right turn only from Hoosick Road onto Lord Avenue to access the site, and right turn only from Lord Avenue onto Hoosick Road to exit the site. No town right roadway except a limited portion of Lord Avenue from Hoosick Road to the project site entrance shall be utilized for truck routing in connection with fill operations. Limitations on days and hours of operation for fill activities shall be established to avoid peak hour traffic on Hoosick Street and shall be prohibited on Sundays and legal holidays. Does anyone have any questions on impact on land?
I guess I have a problem with the right only on the Hoosick Street. I think we're telling the contractor, I think we all discussed it, the only place you can turn off of Hoosick Street is at Oakwood, and that's not gonna be a good turn. And I mean, it may screw traffic up somewhat there, but you're routing the guys way around to get, if they're going back to Mechanicsville or wherever they're going to. It just seems like it's, you're really not helping anything doing that. That's my opinion. I mean, we got that from discussion with the board, but, I mean, it makes sense because you're not cutting across traffic, but You gotta go down Hoosick Street, you gotta take that turn at the old firehouse.
And that kind of becomes a different issue than the impact on land item.
Well, I don't know, you just read it here out
I
of this.
know,
Right, it is related to impact on land because of the fill activities and bringing in that amount of fill to the project site. So it is connected to impact on land. You need to get the material to the site for the fill operation. Well, you can address this, but the right turn in, right turn out only was principally for traffic on Hoosick Road and in and out.
right, and that was the proposal by the applicant.
Right.
I remember them stating that they weren't gonna have flaggers. And I said, well, if you're not gonna have flaggers, you're only gonna be able to get, you'll never get a truck out of there turning east.
I guess from a seeker perspective, I guess we need to determine if that's significant impact, and if we have to change how we're describing what that impact on land is.
My only thing would be to not forbid them from going right out of there.
Well, one option for discussion would be, I think it does make sense for right turn in. But if you're coming out and proposing a left-hand turn, then I would think that would be minimally require flaggers. So you think when you're crossing,
Well, they'd be crossing one lane of traffic, getting into the center turn lane, and then merging in the traffic heading east. So a lot- I don't know how, they would barely fit in the center turn lane. The center turn lanes are about 8 feet wide. How wide's a 10-wheeler? How wide's a 18-wheeler?
Can't be over 8 feet.
No, it's probably less than, it's probably 6.5, 7 feet. They look bigger.
So the trucking company agreed to this, said they could make the turns if they didn't have an issue with it, so.
yeah, one option for language would be right turn in only. And in the event a left turn out on the Hoosick is sought, then condition it on flaggers or DOT requirements. Does that make sense?
I think DOT should be involved in what they allow for that number of trucks to turn left out on Route 7. We may have an issue with that. I don't know.
If you're gonna turn an 18-wheeler down at that firehouse, you're gonna be in the middle lane to get enough room to turn without hitting the car coming down over it.
Maybe we should get some clarification from the applicant as to what.
I mean, I don't wanna really hold this up.
The trailers are,
Right.
yeah.
That's a good question.
But the trailer.
The 10-wheeler can turn right.
Sure, that's what I'm saying.
Can I make a suggestion? The board and the applicant agree that the recommended route, which road is in the applicant? That the right turn, right in, right out is the suggested method for delivery for the trucking, but the applicant will meet with the building department and/or DOT if necessary prior to trucking to figure out the exact route and if flag people are required. Maybe they're required for the right out too during certain times of days, but I think it would be best that if we got the contractor and the trucker there, knowing that he's supposed to go right in, right out, but if there's a better way or there's a safety issue where we need to have signage and or flag people, we
Sounds reasonable to me.
And if at any time the building department has an issue, or the town has an issue with the delivery route, with the delivery path, the trucks will have to work together to figure it out. Because obviously, trying to make a left-hand turn out of there, it's gonna take a long time. They want those trucks back as quickly as they can get back, and load them up again, so we'll work together to try to come up with the best and safest method for the truck.
Could you repeat how that's gonna be worded?
I can take a crack at it, which is, it is recommended that trucks leaving the site make a right turn, it be right in only. And when trucks are exiting, the recommended route is right turn. But prior to commencement of any construction activities, the applicant and contractor will coordinate with, I would suggest, the Brunswick Building Department, planning board engineer, and New York State DOT on the final truck route.
Does that satisfy you? Don, you have a question?
Yeah, we're not clear on the hours of operation. You just said they have to be determined.
Right, that's also something that we could discuss when we deliberate for site plan. As far as seeker's concerned, my intention was to establish some hours so they don't come in at 5 a.m. and run till 9 p.m. But I'm not sure, it kind of has to do with the peak hours of heavy traffic on Route 7. I mean, it makes sense that it wouldn't start until perhaps after peak hour in the morning, because that's where coming down on that route west is where the heaviest traffic on Route 7 is. And maybe the impact is less in the afternoon or the PM peak because traffic is traveling mostly west to east.
Right, and I would add, Don, that that's probably an issue also to coordinate with DOT on trucks coming in and out onto the highway. They may have some limitations as well with the number of trailers coming onto the highway. So that could also be part of the discussion with DOT prior to commencement.
And this is only relative to construction.
Correct.
We'll get to the hours of operation of the business, I believe.
This was particular to impact on land, which is primarily the fill activity, so construction related truck traffic.
Okay, Wayne, is there any more questions on that, on number 1? The impact on that. Okay, Wayne, we continue on there.
Page 2, item 3, impacts on surface water. Proposed action may affect one or more wetlands or other surface water bodies. Wetlands were delineated on the site. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has determined that these wetlands are excluded from Clean Water Act jurisdiction. And there are no New York State DEC mapped wetlands on the site. I should also point out that we did approve the stormwater plan after several iterations. And that we've got it to a point where we feel that we've adequately addressed stormwater. Any questions on that? Next, on page 3, item number 5, impact on flooding. The Proposed action may result in development on land subject to flooding. The site is not in a floodway or floodplain, however, there is a history of flooding along the westerly property line. So we check that as potential impact. However, the changes in grading and stormwater management controls will mitigate that isolated flooding issue on the site. They are building a berm along that western property line and regrading. It's generally in the site of the one stormwater pond along the property line on the westerly side. Does anybody have any questions on impact on flooding or comments?
The new stormwater pond does not constitute a dam. The berming for the new stormwater pond does not constitute a dam.
Well, Birmingham is I probably misspoke. Birmingham is actually towards the back,
Northwest.
the northwest portion of the site. It will be regrading, so. Any other comments on that? On page 4, item 7, impacts on plants and animals. Proposed action may result in a loss of flora or fauna. The project does include clearing of vegetation on land previously used for growing crops. Most of the vegetation there now is successional growth of trees that have grown up in the last few years. And there are no endangered or threatened species of plants or animals listed for this site. Questions or comments on that? Moving on, page 5, item number 8, impact on agricultural resources. We've identified that there may be impacts. The proposed action may impact agricultural resources. Proposed action is located in an agricultural district and will irreversibly convert more than 2.5 acres of ag land to non-ag land. While the project site will be converted to a non-agricultural use, the impact to total agricultural resources in the town is deemed to be a small impact. I will note that due to the amount of property that's being taken out of agricultural use is over 2.5 acres, which will result in a type 1 action for this application. Does anybody have any questions on that? Moving all the way to page 8. Item 13, impact on transportation. Proposed action may result in a change to existing transportation systems. It is anticipated that the proposed project will add traffic to the local road network in the adjacent neighborhoods. The data provided indicates that there will be a small impact to the adjacent neighborhoods over existing conditions. An independent review of the traffic analysis presented by the applicant determines that the information provided, the traffic analysis is reasonable and based on traffic engineering analysis accepted as the industry standard. The Traffic counts collected in the adjacent neighborhood indicates there is currently cut-through traffic on Genesee Street and on Siegel Avenue, indicating an existing condition. The independent traffic review suggested consideration of traffic calming measures. Several types of traffic calming measures were presented for consideration. These include the installation of speed tables, speed humps, enhanced signing and striping. The Brunswick Town Highway Superintendent was contacted to review potential traffic calming measures. The Brunswick Highway Superintendent indicated that speed humps or speed tables were not desirable due to their impact on road maintenance, specifically snow plowing during the winter. The Brunswick Highway Superintendent was agreeable to the enhancement of traffic signing and striping as an appropriate mitigation measure. It is required that the applicant / owner fund an escrow account with the town of Brunswick in an amount to be determined to be utilized by the town of Brunswick to complete post-construction traffic counts on Genesee Street, on Siegel Avenue, and Duncan Lane. To confirm the data submitted by the applicant and to assess the appropriate content and location of signage and striping on such town roadways. And if post-construction traffic counts so warrant, analysis and implementation of further traffic calming devices on such town roadways as outlined in the independent traffic review. Further, as a mitigation measure to address potential cut-through traffic on such town roadways, the project driveway connecting to Lord Avenue must be designed to allow right turn exit only from the site onto Lord Avenue. A lot of information there. Any comments or questions on that? Hearing none, moving on. Page,
Wait, can you just back up to the top real quick?
sure.
So the last sentence about, for the mitigation measures to address the cut-through traffic on such town road. Project driveway connecting to Florida Avenue must be designed to allow right turn. So,
So a prohibited left turn coming out of,
yeah, so right now, based on discussions from previous meetings, we did include a no left turn signage for trucks. So, trucks was an issue throughout the process. For regular for vehicles, it is not. It is a left turn and it says trucks. Having that, it could possibly, I can see it being a little bit irritating. Say you live on Tucker, which is 100 feet to the left of that intersection. You can't get back to your house, which you can't make a left out of that access road. So now you're forced to take a right onto Hoosick Road to get to the light, to make a left onto Hoosick, and then to make another left to get back into that neighborhood. I don't think it would make a difference either way. It's just, we would have to just change that.
there would have to be a minor modification to the site plan.
Just quickly, so Alana Moran with VHB, so from a, it's gonna put words in your mouth, Rich, but from an applicant perspective, providing that right turnout is really not a problem, right? Restricting turns out doesn't really matter that much.
I just don't want to upset people in the neighborhood, that's all.
Exactly. By restricting left turns exiting the site, you're not really changing the cut-through traffic perspective. Somebody who's coming through the neighborhood is going to come through the neighborhood. What you're doing is affecting the people that might live in the neighborhood and go to the store and then want to go back to the neighborhood. Just something to consider as you're moving forward with your decisions.
May
I
I
guess
make a
I'll leave that
comment?
up to the board to comment.
I think the reason that we were concerned about just left turns only was the fact that granted, people from the neighborhood could have access coming into the store, but would also allow for only one set of traffic going through the neighborhood. Where if they had to go right, go out to Hoosick Street, they're just gonna go out to Hoosick Street, and they're gonna shoot down that C. So, but what it's gonna do is discourage those people that are not members of the neighborhood to now be forced to go back out to Hoosick Street and not go back through. So that was the logic. It was going to cut half the traffic going back and forth.
Yep, I absolutely understand your logic with it. It's just completely up to you folks how you want to work with that.
Well, I mean, we're working with the from the comments of the public here.
Absolutely, yeah.
And, it's not a perfect world. So if the neighborhood wants to cut down on traffic, they're gonna have to also cut down on their own traffic. So, it's a give and take type thing.
Absolutely.
There was a submittal from one of the neighbors over there, and he actually put a drawing on over yours. It indicated that even putting curbing to force people, we don't know if that's necessary, but he took into consideration, and they took, I think quite a few of the neighbors got involved with that.
Yeah.
So I see your point. I think it's a mitigating circumstances to cut the traffic down.
Yeah.
Not to say that somebody isn't gonna take a left-hand turn out of there, but that's beside the point. But it does leave the residents an opportunity to, just shoot in the next street down, so it's not a big deal. I don't think it's a big deal. I mean, they're not having to cross traffic or anything like that.
Walmart has a right-only crossing Burger King. And all the time they cut across Route 7 and head for Troy.
But you're right, it will definitely discourage people from making that left turn. It's a lot harder.
Any other questions on on that particular comment? Okay, we got, we're on number 7.
Number 7 on page 8 is item 14, impact on energy. Proposed action may cause an increase in the use of any form of energy. The supermarket does require power heating and cooling, but not at significant levels. Construction of the site and building require energy, but is a temporary impact and is also not at significant levels. So we have a small impact. Also on page 8, item 15, impact on noise, odor, and light. Proposed action may result in an increase in noise, odors, and light. The project includes a 50,000 square foot building with plus or minus 250 space parking lot that was previously an agricultural field. While there would be an increase in light, photometric analysis was prepared and reviewed, showing that the lighting proposed is a dark sky friendly downward lighting that will not migrate beyond the property. Any questions on anything?
Okay, that's part 2. Are there any questions on part 2? We're moving on to part 3.
Before Wayne jumps into part three, I think then Wayne would be an appropriate modification to item 1 on your memo, based on our discussion tonight about the right out, leaving, that we can include that language about
It can help me with that.
the preferred route being right out, but we'll coordinate with the building department, and board engineer, DOT on the preferred truck route.
Should we include anything on flaggers and signage?
I think it'd be adequate in the secret determination to say compliance with any DOT requirements.
That sounds
Could we go back to, item 15 on part 2? On this application, did the applicant suggest the lighting being dimmed after closing hours?
Yes.
And could that be added as one of the mitigating factors?
Yeah, we can. Can I get the actual procedure for the reduction in lighting?
Would this be a secret thing, or could we make this a condition on the site plan approval?
That's what I was gonna say. If the record does support the conclusion that while there would be a light impact that's deemed to be small based on the photometric analysis, then that's probably supportive of the secret determination, but an appropriate site plan condition would be, I think it was, shut it off the lights.
At 11 o'clock, the store will close, they'll turn on the outer lights, we'll have the front entrance lit for the night vision safety and health. That's our plan.
We should,
Happy to put that on.
yeah, we should have that discussed as a site plan condition.
Thank you.
And one more thing while we're on, before we go to part 3. Again, with the right out, I don't have a problem with it, but my thought process would be to not inconvenience people in the neighborhood. Could we discuss that as part of site plan approval and not make it, in the record for the seeker? Because my thought was, we're going to put in money for a post-construction, post-operational traffic study. With that traffic study and the calming in the neighborhood, provide enough information to see if the left out of our store into the neighborhood is a significant impact. Which we could make, just for discussion. Again, I'm okay, but I'm just thinking of people, once they calm down and they realize if this store does get built and they do shop there, I don't want to upset them by saying, I'm not going to that store because I can't get home because I got to go all the way around.
So thoughts on that one?
He does have a good point that we're mitigating something that all the data isn't available yet to determine whether that mitigation is necessary. I don't know, I would lean towards leaving it in, but as far as what the actual construction of a prohibited left turn is there, can still be left based on how the operation of the site works after construction. You know what I mean?
I mean, I tend to agree. I think if we leave that in there now, that's the right out only, but add language that says, as part of the post-construction traffic count and monitoring, that a review of the right turnout only condition can be assessed at that. Perfect. That way we've got a mitigation measure that's supported in the record, but we can take a look at post-construction. And by the way, for the board, the issue of requiring the escrow from the applicant, these are town roads, the town has jurisdiction over them. This is in the nature of the current record does support the conclusion of small impact that's been reviewed independently. But to require the applicant to do post-construction assessment, I think, in my opinion, could be deemed to be a deferral of that. I think the record is fully supportive of small traffic impact in the neighborhoods based on the record we have right now. But this is in the nature of funding an escrow for the town to monitor the use of their town roads and determine if any further traffic calming or traffic mitigations are required, and then the town would be doing that over those roads in the neighborhood. And that way, it almost is in the nature of confirming the record, because the record, the data does support no significant impact and no significant required mitigation measures other than we've discussed. But this would allow the town then to do that post-construction study and have the applicant fund an escrow account to do that. And the amount of that can be discussed as we move forward toward site plan applications.
Any other comments? Okay. Let's start with part three.
Okay, full environmental assessment form part 3 is the evaluation of the magnitude and importance of project impacts and the determination of significance. We've taken the information provided in part 1 and part 2 to make that determination. On the first page, under reasons supporting this determination, we've added some comments. The lead agency has evaluated the magnitude, duration, likelihood, scale, and context of the project, and has decided that the potential impacts are adequately mitigated. Impacts to nearby local streets have been identified. However, there is an existing condition on local streets whereby traffic uses these streets to bypass and avoid Route 7. It has been determined that additional traffic added to local streets as a result of this action is a small impact and can be mitigated. Short-term impacts may occur during construction, but in light of the scale and context of the project area, these are seen as a small impact, and the project complies with zoning. The seeker status will be a type 1. On reviewing the information recorded on this EAF as noted, plus any additional support information, and considering both the magnitude and importance of each identified potential impact, it is the conclusion of the lead agency that although this project could have a significant adverse impact on the environment, that impact will be avoided or substantially mitigated because of the following conditions, which will be required by the lead agency. That the applicant monitor traffic on adjacent local streets post-construction.
Lenny, looking at this thing, I think we might want to revise that language here on the discussion tonight and just make it clear that the town will be monitoring the traffic adjacent local streets post-construction through the establishment of an escrow fund by the applicant. So we're going to want to make that change to make that clear too.
There will therefore be no significant adverse impacts from the project as condition, and therefore this condition negative declaration issued. The rest just lists the name of the action and the lead agency. And that's the signature block or the chairman.
Obviously, there has to be some changes to this, so.
Right, and then in fact, as we sit here, I mean, I want to make one further suggestion, it's part three, on page 2. Rather than checking letter B, I do think the record does support checking letter A. No significant adverse impacts on the environment, and therefore the EIS is not prepared. I do think by having the data in the record, particularly on the traffic, the conclusion is there's no anticipated significant adverse traffic impacts based on the record right now. This really is in the nature of the town doing some post-construction monitoring through an escrow. I think it's more appropriate not to check B, but rather to check letter A on this record. We made
Then
that clear in part
we
two.
could let the memorandum as part of the record
Stand.
cover
That's correct.
that.
That would be my opinion. Particularly in light of the fact that this is a type 1 action, I think checking letter A is a more appropriate response. You follow that? Yeah. So I propose to make that edit if you're okay with that line in the board section.
Everyone okay with that? Any questions? All right, with that being completed, we can move forward and determine the secret determination at this point. Okay, I'll entertain a motion for a negative declaration of the secret. Anybody like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Before you go, I'd like to do a little bit of discussion on this entrance and exit right only. Did you get a copy of that drawing that?
No.
The resident proposed actually curbing. That would also involve possibly widening your entrance to accommodate different truck radiuses and so forth and so on. But I'm not so sure that curbing is necessary, to be honest with you. I think you would just add to the confusion of the site, to be honest with you. Wayne, do you have any comments on that?
Well, to be perfectly frank, I'm not a big fan of curved islands anyway. They are a maintenance issue. Over time, they deteriorate and they will be up our plows. They're almost a hazard if they're not put in the proper way.
Do you think we can achieve the same results by properly marking and signage on the road in the entrance way?
Identical results? No, because people will still be able to make a left turn if it's striped and signed. Majority of people will obey the regulatory signage, but not everybody. Just like Dave said, people pull out of Walmart and make a left.
Yeah, but that has curbing.
Yeah.
So what difference does it make? I think we discussed it in depth. Originally it was for, trucks only. Just using signage for all turns.
Well, that's another issue too. Can a tractor trailer navigate the lane with curbing?
Well,
You could make it mountable curbing, I suppose.
it was acknowledged by the person that submitted that they would probably have to put additional paving out to accommodate the turning radius. I would be all set with just, signage at this point.
Signage and striping, you can stripe it so that there's a board area there that keeps people in the lane, not
Yeah,
cross over the crosshatch. Border.
would you agree with that, or, is it a problem? I don't think it's an issue.
The striping the signage?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and like I said, that way too, if you do striping and signage and then you do your traffic study, or you get enough complaints from the neighborhood saying you want to be able to make a left-hand turn, it's easily modified in the future.
Okay. Okay, at this point, what do we need to move forward?
So at this point procedurally, the public hearing, or strike that, the secret determination has been completed. There is the need for an area variance on the project due to the height of the light poles. That does need to be addressed prior to this board acting. The zoning board will be meeting on September 13th, prior to your next meeting. So if you, presuming the zoning board acts that evening, it'd be appropriate to have this on your agenda for your next meeting. And in your opinion, there's any additional information that would be required to make the site plan determination, let's make sure we reach out to the applicant in advance of that meeting.
I can review the record and
Yeah.
let them know.
Great, great.
All right?
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And our next meeting is scheduled for the 16th. And you said that the zoning board meets on the
Is that Monday?
13th.
13th, okay. All right. So we'll see you on the 16th.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is the Gallivan minor subdivision. Is anybody here for that?
No, it's not. That's been tabled till the 16th. The applicant had multiple meetings to go to, did not expect to make it here.
Okay. Okay, next is the changing visions of energy, CDE, North America. This is a referral from the town board.
Oh, shucks. Sorry, guys.
Before we get into this, Andy, is there a correction that has to be made to the?
Right, so let me review with the board. As we discussed at the last board meeting, there certainly was confusion on my part, if not the applicant's part, on the parcels that were subject to the zone change petition. And so we did go back through the application documents, including the actual construction plans or the site plans, the tax mapping and the zoning map. And it is confirmed that there's two parcels that are sought to be rezoned in connection with this. So it's the parcel, if I can say, in the upper left-hand corner on which panels are proposed, and also the parcel along the entrance road that goes onto an adjacent parcel owned by Chuck McCabe.
Yep.
That is not in the agricultural overlay district, and that would also require rezoning since the access road is part of the overall project. So there are two parcels. The town board acceptance of the petition for rezoning does reference only one. So That will need to be addressed and cleared up on the record. The town board would have to formally accept the petition to rezone the parcel for the access road. That should be addressed by the town board at next week's town board meeting. But just to clear that up, yes, the record does need to be cleared up. That will also require another referral to the county, because when the referral was made to the county, it referenced only one of the tax parcels. So to clean that record up, we'll be referring it again to the county and making it clear that the rezoning petition is for both parcels. I thought it would be appropriate still to have the board tonight deliberate on the referral from the town board. I think it's safe to presume the referral now would cover both parcels and to continue your deliberation on a recommendation. But we'll get that record cleaned up in due course.
Okay. Why don't you just give us a refresher here?
Sure. Yep, so I'm Carson Winan with CVE. We're a community solar development company out of New York City. We have a portfolio of projects in upstate New York, very similar to this, about 7 of them that are working through permitting in various towns. You know, they are about 25 to 35 acre community solar projects. They're about 12,000 panels, 10 to 13,000 panels, 5 to 6 megawatts, and they're participating in the NYSERDA state level community solar program. That's the authority agency that incentivizes these projects, and we work with National Grid to connect them to the grid. The benefit of community solar is that the local residents nearby can subscribe to the facility and receive discounts on their monthly utility bill. That's the model behind community solar. And yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the rezoning. Underneath the array will be pollinator-friendly vegetation, so grasses and flowers. We receive community solar credits from NYSERDA for 25 years. And at that time, we'll reassess, you know, the economic viability of the project and determine if we want to decommission or sell into the wholesale power market at a lower rate. The maximum life of this project is 35 years. Really, after that, the panels shouldn't be producing much power. They degrade annually a little bit every year, about 0.5% every year. And yeah, you know, one thing that CVE does on each project is we make a donation to a local environmental agency, $1 per panel. So it's called our Green Initiative. There's about 12,000 panels here. So if this project gets built, we'd be making that donation, working with residents in the town to find a cause that we can get behind and make that donation. So we have our interconnection study back. Interconnection is feasible from National Grid. We have all the site leases in place, signed and in place with Virginia Ritrovato, who's Chuck McCabe's mother, Michael Cesney, who owns this portion of the property, and then Chuck McCabe himself. We have an executed access easement and an owner consent form for the rezoning. We performed a wetlands delineation. And there's a handful of wetlands over here. There's also a lot of steep slopes, and that's why we're not using this portion of the property. We're trying to focus on the previously cleared open field on the western side. Yep, so we appeared in front of the planning board 2 weeks ago, and since then we've performed a drone video, a drone survey, which I sent via email to Wendy, I think yesterday or the day before. If you have a chance to look at that, that'll give you some really good context, some visuals onto what this site looks like in person. It's one continuous site. You know, it's a little bit arbitrary how the zoning cuts through the middle of the field. It seems to be one continuous agricultural field surrounded by other agricultural properties. Only one abutter. There's some beneath this red line, there's existing vegetation, limiting their visual, their sight of the field. No other abutters. It's very well hidden. This is a 500-foot line, this red line. So, yeah. North Lake Ave is right here. And then Bel Air Lane is here, goes to Lord Lane, and then down to Hoosick. Lord Ave.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay, at this point, we have the responsibility to make a recommendation, review this, make a recommendation to town board for the rezoning only. We're not into any site plan review at this point or anything like that. This is strictly discussion on the recommendation to the town board on a rezoning. Obviously, now it's expanded out to 2 parcels. But I don't think that should make any difference in our discussion at this point. So keep in mind that this is two zone changes for a small portion down there by the access road, and then the larger portion up in the, what would be that, the northwest corner. I have a question, just a quick question. I know it's, the information is probably available in my packet. The parcel that you want to zone up there in the corner, how many acres is that?
7 acres or so. Roughly 7 acres.
7.
Yep. Or at least, Mr. Cessny, I think covers about 7 acres.
Okay.
But the rezoning would be for the entire parcel, correct?
The answer to that is yes, because the petition was for the whole tax ID number.
That parcel extends down this wooded slope to this open field, and then his home is right here.
Explain that again.
Yeah. So this is all one parcel.
So we would get, that would be a zone change for the whole parcel?
This is a wooded,
Not just your 7 acres?
I mean, up to the planning board. We're comfortable either way.
What I can tell you is that the petition pending in front of the town board is to rezone the tax parcel. Not the project site.
We're going from what to what?
Same underlying residential, I believe it's R40. Yep, R40, just an extension of the ag overlay over top of R40. As Ashley said 2 weeks ago, an expansion of their zoning, what they're allowed to do. It doesn't limit.
The remainder of that parcel that's outside your area,
That's correct.
with that, it appears to be like a field up through there. Would that be something that you would be interested in expanding out your solar field?
No. They would not be interested.
And
Very
there's steep slopes up in that area as well, which is probably why it wasn't clear to begin.
Yeah, very difficult to get from this field up to this field.
Russ, are you talking about part where it says parcel 1 up there, that little square? Or?
Yeah,
I don't, well, that's kind of in the shadow of that hill, I think.
Yeah, technically the same parcel as this. This right here is the same parcel as this.
And that, under parcel 1, you're not interested in that property for solar.
And over here,
Yeah.
yeah, we're not. We don't need it, and it's very difficult to get to. Very difficult to access because of the slopes.
okay, I'm gonna open up the floor to comments from the board here.
Right, and I'll just note that if the board has any questions, certainly for the applicant, but Bob Titus from LaBerge is here as well, who's I think is town designated review engineer, so he's available to help the board as well.
could open up the floor, but I'm going to excuse myself. So,
Well, I don't know what the other board members may think of this, but I'm concerned that if we make a change in zoning, this will open the door for other people to come in and request zoning changes. Could indicate a larger problem on the horizon. I don't know what anybody else thinks about that.
We're just extending the ag
Case by
overlay.
case basis.
I'm sorry?
We're only extending the ag overlay.
We're actually giving them more restrictive,
Right.
so it's not like we're changing from A40 to a B15 or making it a commercial enterprise, right? It's restricting what would be allowed by extending the A40. And that was one of my questions earlier about informing the owners, the underlying owners, that they understood the implication of
It's still going to be R40. It's just an extension of the overlay. It's not a restriction of their zoning. It's an expansion of what they could do. It's not A40.
It's an ag overlay extension is
overlay,
what you're
right.
looking for,
Yeah.
yes.
And they're aware and comfortable.
Right, so the board is aware, the underlying zoning district will still remain R40. So technically, it's not a restriction, it's actually adding some allowable uses that are also allowed in the agricultural overlay.
Yep, and the reason why we need this additional parcel, I guess the parcel 3, the tornado coming through?
Down, our house
Okay.
across the street.
No,
They've been busy today,
everybody-
third time out.
Yeah, these firefighters, volunteer firefighters. Should we hide under the desk maybe too? Sounds like a bomb.
I can actually speak to the
Yeah,
access
yeah,
part.
go ahead.
So I kind of mentioned this last time we met, that there is access, it's just extremely steep. If I flip back over here, it's steep, it's narrow, and we'd be disturbing much more of steep slopes, which we've already tried to avoid, between avoiding steep slopes, avoiding the wetlands, and avoiding tree clearing as much as possible. There's some, ancillary tree clearing in certain areas, but here you'll see there's an existing access that we would want to continue, using that access and just tie in at the very top where it kind of is more or less a cul-de-sac. So the easement is just basically across where there's already an existing road. So there wouldn't be a need to impact even more steep slopes. There would be some minor steep slope disturbance in this area, but the two potential paths, one where there's an existing, I'll call it goat trail, is extremely steep, it's extremely narrow, and would cause more clearing. Or the lesser of the two is the option that we chose. There would still be some grading, but it's much less of an impact. So in that area here, and then really the tree clearing kind of is bound, like I said earlier, by that band of red steep slopes, which is, I believe, 25% or greater slopes.
And the outline of parcel 3 is just sort of that rectangle.
I have a question on the 7 acres there. Obviously, it's a cleared field, most of it. It appears to be sitting up on top of a hill. potentially, that is right now R40, is that correct?
Yes.
It is.
Uh, Is that potentially viable to build some houses up to? Or is it so steep there that access could only be made now through the solar field? I mean, I'm not putting you on the spot, I'm just asking your opinion.
There's definitely steep slopes and trees that would make traversing from.
From North Lake.
From where their driveway is up through here, steep, how steep?
I
You
think what
can't
I'm
really
asking-
see
Yes.
underneath the red, but it's tight.
Well, what I'm asking is, what's the feasibility of that actually being viable building lots for?
In the cleared area, fantastic. Getting up to it, it would probably create a switchback to be able to get up there, or a wide swath of grading to be able to get up at 10% or so.
Yeah. Fire access would need 10% usually, 10% grade.
So, whether it's just cutting back and forth serpentine up the hill, or just clear cutting and removing a whole lot of it.
Maybe some blasting, needed to level that slope out.
I don't know what has happened when I was absent here, but my initial reaction is this. I could agree to a zone change for the access road, because it's such, basically, from a safety point of view in some respects, creating an entranceway into the park. I'm very reluctant to recommend a zone change for the other parcel. It has nothing to do with the project itself, it just has to do with what are we going to be facing in the future as a planning board and a town board with other projects, other commercial, for example, projects, up Route 7 or something that need a little extra room and one zone change on a piece of property. I just think it's going to lead down a very dangerous road. That's the problem I have with the rezoning. So right now, my recommendation would be not to allow the rezoning. That's just my personal opinion.
If I could just respond, my name is Jared Lusk, I'm covering the meeting for Ashley Champion, who was here last time. As a land use and zoning lawyer and someone who's sat on a town board and wrestled with rezoning issues, I fully understand your concern. As you look at this from this view, however, you wonder, the Ag Overlay District, it certainly covered a big portion, but it certainly, when you talk about the use of Ag Overlay, there's the area that's part of the project that's located to the north that wasn't included. You sort of wonder why it wasn't included when the initial zoning was drafted. And I have a feeling it was because the residential area was behind it and we were picking individual tax parcels to put for it. But if you were to draw a map of an agricultural overlay, when you're doing it, you might say the boundaries of the ag overlay should have been this anyway, because you're never going to farm the hill anyway around it in the wooded area. And so the question, again, just asking you from a practical perspective to view the zoning and the land use out there in the world, and what is the proper use of the land in context of the land around it. If we were seeking to expand ag overlay into an area that wasn't ag, or wasn't previously used for ag, this was an active farm field, and the only difference here is that there's an arbitrary tax parcel line drawn on a map as opposed to the field that's there. And obviously, this is a unique situation given the top of the hill, the surrounding uses, and certainly, I think your concerns are one to raise with the town board, but I think they should balance the overall land plan and the proper use of land in the context of the project and what's happening around it. I would question really why when the board, and I do realize you were part of the zoning, but that's certainly a nice piece of farmland that probably should have been, or was, farm, maybe should have been in the ag overlay district to begin with, or a portion of that property where the farming was occurring.
Well, I appreciate that, your comments, and I was trying to get, earlier in the conversation, what the property, could the property be a feasible one or two, building lots? And it appears that it would be a rather expensive thing. If the solar field went through without that parcel, then the person would be sitting there looking at a solar field anyway. So I still have some reservations, but I understand your point. I appreciate your comments. Anybody else have any comments?
I have a question for Andy, actually, because these, the panels are crossing, property line. Do they require a setback?
They would. Yeah, part of this project would need an area variance for the internal lot line setbacks. And that has been submitted. We may also ultimately need an area variance for the poles going in under the town's commercial solar regulations, but it is pending for the setback variance for the internal lot line.
Although the application is for parcel 1 to be totally rezoned, is there a potential to provide the ag overlay to a portion of the property of parcel 1?
There is existing in town in some locations where a single parcel is split between zoning districts. Yes, that's possible. That is one option. There's a couple of things for the board to consider too when making their recommendation. One is a parcel can be split between 2 zoning districts. As I said, there are parcels in town currently where that exists.
That actually exists on the main parcel 2. So down below, you'll see it's R25, and right across here, so this is R40, and this is R25 down through here.
Right, so that's one issue, and I think you heard from the applicant earlier that they'd be open to that option, which would limit the amount of rezone to only part of the SESNY parcel, not the entire SESNY parcel. The other thing to consider is there is the option for the town board. It's going to be a town board discretionary determination. But on a particular rezone for a project, you can add conditions to that rezoning for that particular project. Certain things like maintaining vegetation come to mind on a project site like this, at least on this side of North Lake Avenue. So these are some options for the board to consider on its recommendation. As we said, ultimately the town board will consider conditions, if any, attached to actual rezone.
Let me ask a question. This is all lease arrangements, right? You're not purchasing any of this property. Would it make sense for the owner to do a waiver subdivision and divide that piece of lot?
But not necessary. And from a zoning perspective, you can have a zoning district boundary line bisect the parcel.
Yeah.
And right now there is a lease that's proposed for part of the parcel that will have a meets and bounds description, and that's not unusual. They have a project lease part of the parcel. We've had that before on cell tower projects, on solar fields, so that's not unusual. A subdivision would not be required. It's not needed for purposes of saying, if I'm okay to recommend a zone change, but only on a part of the parcel, let's divide that off. In my opinion, that wouldn't be legally required. You do have the ability, a town has the ability to zone part of the parcel in one zoning district and part of the parcel in another zoning district.
Russ, I have a question for you. Give me an example. What do you think this is going to trigger if we allow this zoning change in your mind?
I'm thinking of maybe a project It's now in the like secondary area of Huzik Street. Might be an apartment complex, it might be something like that. Of course, you know, they do have the PDD option. But I'm thinking of some maybe commercial area, that, some light commercial, that may want additional spot for, parking or something like that. And all of a sudden you want that rezone from like R15 to commercial. I don't know, we may never see anything, like that for 10 years.
I'd like to hear from the Verge. You got comments on this?
From a technical standpoint, I have a couple of minor comments on it. Technically, it all seems feasible. We have quite a bit of grading associated with the entrance drive in order to make a cut, to get up the slope, get up to the main area where the solar panels are. There's a regular cut in there, so I mean, that's, it's going to be some work to do that. There's some retaining walls shown there in order to make that happen. Like I said, a couple minor comments in there about that, but it's all doable. As far as the panels, we're doing the panels the right way. We're proposing it right anyways. They're going to drive stakes in the ground in order to support the panels. Am I right? So that's the least amount of disturbance of the land. So you still have full grass cover underneath it. So that minimizes the impact, and it completely assists with the stormwater runoff conditions. It makes it easier for percolation to continue to happen, or the infiltration in the ground. So you don't have just this giant impervious area that's been installed over the ground. There's a couple of pads they're putting in for the transformers. They of course are putting a driveway through. It's I guess a green driveway, for lack of a better word, where they're doing a geogrid, so that it still stabilizes the ground, so you can still drive over the grass and go there. So they're doing things the best way, I think, that they can environmentally for this particular submission.
Let me ask you a question. Do you have a problem?
No, I think it's a great spot for a farm. It has very little impact to the residential homes around it. And I think you're just asking, the fact that you're just asking for an extension of the overlay, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. I'm just looking at it from a different point.
I
mean,
understand.
I like the project. I'm not anti-solar or anything like that. The action is what, the consequences of doing this. I'm not convinced that I'm comfortable with that. Anybody else have any questions for Dan or me?
Yes, I would just say that I would be in favor of a partial overlay of parcel 1 that's consistent with the plan for the solar expansion that does not continue down to North Lake Avenue.
Is that the horse farm they got there?
Consistent.
The ag overlay will not go to the horse farm.
Will not include the horse farm.
I was thinking that's the point. Maybe I'm misunderstanding why we are.
I don't have a problem.
Right.
That's what Linda just said, I would be in favor. I don't want to see the whole parcel, but I would like to see it contained just to that 7 acres. Is everybody on board with that?
Partial.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Your comments.
So you said, when you were out of the room, basically.
Well,
I said the same thing.
okay. So right now, between the 7 of us, I would assume that 5 are pretty much in favor of granting the rezoning, and 2 are, let's say, on the fence.
Right, based on this deliberation, what I propose to do is, what you've done in the past on these recommendations, is to draw up something for your review at the September 16 meeting, which would be in the nature of what it sounds like is supportive of the zone change request to the extent of rezoning part of the SESD parcel, limited to the project site, approximately 7 acres, supportive of the rezoning for the access road, with a concern regarding the precedent
Yes.
that a rezoning could, and that's something that should be considered by the town board going forward, something in that nature. We could prepare that and you could review that, even if that's not unanimously supported. If a majority does support that recommendation, then that would go to the town.
I guess if you did the ag overlay over the whole parcel, the remaining part of the parcel is the horse farm. I mean,
On the other side of North
it
Lake?
says parcel 1,
Yeah.
I think that's a horse farm right in
Yes,
there. Barn and pastures, right?
3 acres.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if they got horses there now, but they
used to have.
used to have
They sure got
horses in
enough,
there.
they got sure got enough pasture behind it.
I would think, and they've been cutting the hay.
Yeah.
Somebody's been cutting something in there, but I mean, it's the
Well,
extended
I don't-
ag overlay, you might as well do the whole thing.
Well, my only suggestion would be, if that's what its current use is, then it certainly can allow to be continued in that use. By adding the ag overlay, realize this is not limited to just a solar project. It's any use allowed in the ag overlay district. One project is being proposed, and that would be solar, which is allowed, and if approved, what you've heard is that this is a project that'll be 30 years in duration, or potentially longer. But other areas that could be rezoned to be included in the ag overlay district would open up those other areas to other uses allowed in the ag overlay district, not just the existing agriculture. There are other uses in the use table that are allowable in the ag overlay district, so that's something for you to consider. And just primer again on the ag overlay and why certain parcels were in and out. In 2017, you look at the intent and purpose of the zoning districts and the zoning law. It was designed, the ag overlay district designed to follow the county agricultural district map. Not necessarily where the ag operations were, but where the formal ag districts on the county ag district map were located. That's where the lines were drawn, literally just taking lines from an existing map and putting them on to the zoning map as an overlay.
Do you know
logical
offhand, excuse me, Andy, do you know offhand what other operations you'd be talking about possibly?
In the ag overlay district?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
Well, I was looking, it was brought up last time that that particular parcel is in an agricultural zone. It's, I think it's a county agricultural zone. And so there is, as far as development on that type of zone, you're supposed to make it so that you can go back, so it can go back easily to agricultural, if, say, the project were to defunct or something. And that is possible with this type of development, because again, there are just driving stakes in the ground, not regrading the entire parcel, they're not, redoing
Okay.
everything.
I'll be right there.
It'll produce enough clean energy that it's equivalent to planting about 200,000 trees. That's the major benefit of this project. It's just a massive amount of clean energy being placed on the grid, displacing brown energy. Removing enough carbon from the grid, it's equivalent to about planting 200,000 trees.
Could you clarify what the megawattage will be? And one of the documents I saw 4 megawatts, you just mentioned like 6 to 8 megawatts.
Yeah, it's 4 megawatts AC, and then the DC size is about 5.5.
So I'm just gonna run through the use table in the zoning law for the agricultural overlay district. Now realize in the energy group, it is large scale commercial solar, and not that there has been any proposed in the town, but a wind turbine is also allowable in the district. In the business group, it includes a bed and breakfast, a campground, a civic or social club, a child and adult daycare, a commercial greenhouse, a kennel, and a veterinary office. In addition to
I think we approved the
residential
brewery. I
uses.
think we approved the brewery in one location. Isn't that brewery?
On 278?
Yeah.
That's I think within the business light overlay. That's in the business light overlay, up and down 278, I think so. So those are some other uses, not intensive business uses, but realize there can be other uses, right? You had a kennel reviewed in another part of town, obviously there's issues associated with kennels. But those are kinds of uses that are allowed under the use table within that district. And if the rezoning is approved, it's rezoned, and other uses could come in. So Dave, there is a horse farm on the other side of Northway, and they decide we don't want to do that anymore. We want to run a big kennel. They could come in, and that would be an allowable use, just be in front of the planning board.
So when you draft your recommendation, are you going to make a recommendation of the entire parcel or just the 7 acres?
Right now, what I've heard is that the support would be for the limiting it to the 7 acre project site.
Okay. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll prepare it that way for your review. Again, if the board wants to change that at the meeting on the 16th, by all means. This will just be a draft for your review.
I would personally probably lean towards that versus the whole concept.
We'll get that drawn up and circulated in draft.
Okay. Well, we still have to get the amended resolution from the town board. Is that correct?
Right, that'll come in due course. I do anticipate that next week, and then another referral, a corrected referral to the county. And just for the record, I'll be sending another letter to this board indicating that both parcels are in the.
When's the next town board meeting?
By next Thursday.
So we would be able to at least have the amended,
You should have it in hand by your meeting on the
yes, so
16th.
we can legally respond to it.
Correct.
Okay.
That would be anticipated.
All right.
And just one other note for the record, LaBerge is acting as town designated review engineer. In conjunction with the rezoning petition, what is required is that the town board does need to make a secret determination before it could act on the rezone. And what the secret regulations require is that the entire potential impacts of the project be analyzed at that point. So in all likelihood, there'll be a lead agency coordination notice be sent out by the town board. I confirm with them next week that the town board seeks to be lead agency with technical support by the Verge. So there will be a full seeker review and a public hearing on the rezone in front of the town board. And presuming that there is a secret determination completed and the rezoning is approved, then it would come back to this board for special use permitted site plan as well as the zoning board and the variances. But seeker will have been completed at that point. We'll just be reviewing it on a technical basis.
Okay. Anybody on board with that? Does anybody have any questions? Do you have any questions for us? Or
No further questions.
additional comments that you can?
Your Honor.
And we will, I guess, see you on the 16th, and hopefully we'll have our approve the draft recommendation. It seems to me like it's pretty much following the timeline at this point. With what the board has, the town board has to do, and what we have to do. All right, then we will put you on the agenda for the 16th, and we will hopefully have that available.
Thank you for your consideration tonight.
Okay.
It's nice to meet you all.
Yeah. Good night.
Take care, have a nice weekend. Okay, the last item on our agenda is the Nato Pato LLC site plan.
Metapato,
Matapato?
Metapato, rolls right off the tongue.
I cannot
Metapato,
get that.
Metapato.
I cannot get that.
Do I have that right, Tom? It's Metapato?
I ran into this problem before, didn't I, Tom?
I think so. I think it was Tomato.
Yeah.
You tell them how you come up with those?
They're initials of my sons, two sons, and my wife and myself.
All right.
And different derivatives of it.
Today I was chasing the grandchildren around, and we're gonna come up with a new LLC. So that's pretty good. The package I gave you, it has the site plan on the last page, if you open it up, you see the site plan. Rob Michaels did. The report, there's a report from Bernie Bus about the number of buses that would be used in the site. There is a short environmental assessment form discussing the bus parking usage. And there's a report from Francis Bassolini reviewing the stormwater management plan. They're using the bus parking area. And that's pretty much it. The Bernie Bus says they're approximately going to use 17 big buses, 16 small buses for the Lansingburg School District, which is a little bit less than what we were anticipating. The site plan has space for 23 large buses, 13 small buses. So there's plenty sufficient on the site to handle both. We have a few more buses, I think. They don't know how many for the athletic programs go out later in the day. They may have 2 or 3 buses on the athletic programs, depending where they're at. Francis Bassolini's report basically is saying because the original SWIFT program involved a car wash with paved parking areas and impervious roofs in the car wash. This particular change in use is not going to have any impact upon the SWIFT that was previously approved. As far as the runoff. And that's pretty much it. The